Mr. Sullivan,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
how are you?
Well, I wanted to pass on to you that about 2 or 3 clients, and I'm sorry I don't have their names because the comments I was just in passing have thoroughly enjoyed the Breakthrough Blueprint. They've been in sessions of the Breakthrough Blueprint. So
That's so great.
I'm just giving you market research. I'm just
market research. Anecdotal as it may be, but yes, that's exciting. I'll tell you what, I have a Breakthrough Blueprint this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
And, in Orlando, or
yes, that's Celebration. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
I just love, there couldn't be a more unique ability suited environment for a guy like me than the Breakthrough Blueprint, and I'm forever grateful for the conversation that we had that led to it.
Yeah, I can remember it. I was in my kitchen and I was talking to you, and I asked you the question, which is useful for all of our listeners. What single activity would keep you increasingly fascinated and motivated for the rest of your life?
And that was it. I had it immediately.
And you had it right off the top.
I'll tell you, that was the big shift for me in that conversation, was that I had not heard you, and I think it was kind of a new way of articulating it for you, but I had not heard you articulate, unique ability in that way, really, because that immediately clicked for me. Whereas thinking about introspectively what your unique ability was always sort of a struggle for me. And I think that as I watch other people who start the program, who start with Strategic Coach, who come back to me and say, well, what do you think my unique ability is? Without fail, when I ask them, what's the single activity that would keep you fascinated and motivated for the rest of your life? Or the next 25 years anyway. And they always have an answer for that, which they would never. I think that you're on the right track with your unique ability if you think that, well, that can't possibly be possible to just do that.
Yeah, and that's, you got a lot out of the conversations, but so did I, because I immediately reframed our introduction to unique ability through the ABC model. In other words, anybody can do an inventory of what they're involved in. Let's say they go back over the past quarter, and in the first instance, let's just talk about it from a work standpoint. I mean, how you're making your money in the world. And I say just do an inventory of all your activities that you did during the last 90 days, and you'd probably do over the next 90 days if you didn't make any changes. And immediately I say, some of these activities actually irritate you. That's A. Some of them are just okay activities, and that's B. But C activities are the ones that are really the answer to what would fascinate and motivate you. And you can do a time allocation, to how much you're spending in A, how much you're spending in B, and how much you're spending in C. And then you can very practically make some shifts of time. You could bring in the Jackson time system meeting.
Yes. That's exactly right. You can get an immediate abundance of time with 100 units a day.
Yeah. It's I have a project for you in the future where we will co-author one of my quarterly books, because I'm doing one with Joe Polish, and the Joe Polish one. Joe and I are devoting 10 of our podcast series to a concept called unique. Okay, and we're just identifying what are the mindsets, regardless of what activity that your industry or business you're involved, where over time you will start to appear as unique in your thinking your activities. So Joe and
I like
have this, and the interesting thing about this is it put me in the mind that I'd start using the quarterly books to do partnership books. In other words,
nice.
And what I thought about was just the time system as one of the books, where we really go in depth on the whole notion of breaking your day into 10-minute units.
I like that.
And what kind of mindset do you actually have that you would find that easier and easier to do, because it will lead to what you just said, which is that you have a feeling that you have an abundance of time rather than I don't have enough time.
Right.
You know, and I felt that. I mean, I have to tell you, since we had that conversation and we talked about it over 3 or 4 of our Joy of Procrastination podcasts, I have felt more and more an abundance of time, and you've reported the same thing.
I really have, yeah. Because what it helps do is reclaim all the sort of awkward in-between times. Like as someone with, my best thing, the most absolute assurance that I'm going to do something is if it's synchronous, scheduled, and involves somebody else. 12:30 Sunday afternoon, I'm here 100% involved, right, for 1 hour. I know exactly what's going to happen. And so the things that go on in my week that are like that have 100% certainty of getting done. But it's when the times that require us to just be on our own, as either being a catalyst or moving things forward, or really it's about deciding what we want. This is where I find those 10-minute units really come into being very useful, because as you know, if you've got a 12:30 commitment, you're not really going to start much of anything after, say, 11:45. You start thinking about, okay, I got to start like getting ready. 12 o'clock certainly, but there's still 3 good units between then and now. And that's, you can get a lot done.
Well, I can tell you, I just went through that because it was 12 o'clock. And, I go on high alert because, there's an event today. And, I made sure myself, actually, when I got up this morning, I made sure that my cell phone was fully charged.
Right.
Because this is the first call that I've had on my cell phone since our last podcast, and so I should just put the Dean Jackson, I should write, I should get a custom made
the Dean phone,
the Dean phone, because first of all, nobody has the number except Babs, and I'm always with her, so she uses just personal communication rather than the phone if she's in the same room with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting innovation, isn't it? That if you're actually in the room with the person, just talk to them. You don't have to dial them or leave a message.
So funny.
This harkens back to our last podcast where we talked about my particular approach to being communicated to from the outside world.
Right.
But in that time, I actually brainstormed the tool, the impact filter, and everybody who's in Strategic Coach knows what the impact filter is. And I was setting up a podcast that I want to do with Peter Diamandis, and so instead of going to the purpose, importance, and ideal outcome, which is the usual entry, I just went to the success criteria, and I was able to write down 8 success criteria for the podcast. And here's a real breakthrough for me, Dean. Increasingly, I start the impact filter by going to the success criteria, because I'm seeing it out there in my mind what needs to be achieved, and I have my own impact filter tool on my a custom one that I made for my desktop, and I changed success criteria to brainstorming. What are the 8 most interesting points I can make about this? That's the question I asked for you. And I just zipped through. In about 1.5 units, I got all 8 of them down. And now it's very easy for me to go back and talk about the purpose. So I do it backwards. I'm starting to do my impact filters backwards. Start with the brainstorming. That's really great. I like that. And I introduced this into the workshop this past week. This is the second week of this quarter, so I've done 4 workshops. And I started telling people, look, just brainstorm what the things are that you want to communicate and why this is such an interesting idea, and do that. So I just want to tell you, the Joy of Procrastination conversations that I've had with you, going on 2 years now. In July, it'll be 2 years since we started. It's just profoundly changing my thinking about a lot of things. Me too. I said that today I was at Ari Meisel invited me to come speak at his Art of Less Doing mastermind in Miami this week. And some of the people there were saying how they loved the Joy of Procrastination, listening to it. And I was sharing that with them, that's really been just this check-in of, keeping this conversation going. And the funny thing is, they always said, we never know where it's going to go, but it just is like listening in on you guys having the conversation more than anything, which is exactly. Well, here's if any of the listeners, I'm just putting out an offer here. If any of you know where we're going with our discussions before we start, so we'd enjoy the guidance. Maybe we could learn from this. Maybe other people have a better idea than we do about where these discussions are going. That's so funny. But it was, it had a really great thing. This week, actually, was my. This is the first of my 10 times workshops that I have ever missed. I've gone for. Well, you didn't miss it, right? Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, would normally have been in Toronto for. Was it this Thursday? Was it this past Thursday? It would have been Thursday. Yeah. Here, the thing was that this schedule got rescheduled. So it would have been the week before. Actually, it would have been the week before that you would have been here, and we would have had our lunch at either Jacques or Le Select Bistro. So, we're going to have to take this as a serious challenge, because something's been taken out of our lives with this new schedule, and I think we should give some serious thought of how to create something better. Yeah, I think so. Better. Yeah. Well, my intention is that I'm going to come to at least the summer, the warm weather sessions in Toronto while I'm in. I'll catch back up in June and in September. But then I'm very excited about the Game Changer workshop in a couple of weeks. I'm so excited about it. It starts on April 10th, so we're dating this a little bit, but it starts on April 10th, and we have 32 sign-ups now, which is terrific. I mean, and we said we put a second start date for June, because I have about 10 people who either couldn't make that one or couldn't make the schedule of the April, the 4 workshops that start in April. So right off the bat, we've given everybody an option of 2 dates that they can come to their Game Changer in the first year, because entrepreneurs are scheduled ahead. They have commitments ahead. So, we were faced with this, and I said, well, why don't we just start a second group? And everybody said, oh, well, we won't fill it up. I said, we will eventually, because people will bump up from the 10 times program.
Right.
So I said, this gives them more options. You want to give people options.
Yes, exactly. But I'm super excited. So
speak. Okay, you now I've given you all sorts of market feedback and reports. Now you give me yours.
Well, I was going to mention at the Art of Less Doing, it had a couple of really great breakthroughs. It's interesting how I have really come to not allow myself to think how, or to catch myself whenever I'm going down a path of how do I do something, and keep myself up into really deepening my understanding of what more than how. And so it was really, it was an interesting exercise for me, because the workshop in Miami, there was very, I actually went through the actual workshop. I didn't come down just and speak and run off. I actually sat through it just to be part of it. And so I'm always looking and testing out my resolve around, the temptation of wanting to learn how to do something, and I noticed in the room, people, that's immediately the thing. They're wanting to get a grasp on how to actually do something, and you could see it going down into the weeds, and I really kind of caught myself I had asked a question about, well, how, and then I caught myself and said, forget it, I don't want to know how to do anything. What I really want to know is what about this, this was just to deepen my understanding of what is possible with a tool rather than how, and to be able to immediately then, describe what it is that I want to the appropriate who can make that happen, which happens to be on my team, Stuart. And so I was able to, a couple of things. You and I had talked about the email situation, right? The frequency of email. And what I discovered through listening to one of the sessions at the workshop was the ability through, a program called If This Then That, you can set up rules that are, if an email in my inbox, any of my inboxes, but let's say my main inbox is starred with a purple star, I'd like you to gather those up at 6 p.m. every day and send me a digest of those to this email address. And so that really takes we had talked about my experiment of, I'd like to just see what it would be like to get my emails once a day rather than constantly throughout the day. And so this week will be the first week, and it'll be a good experiment because I've got a breakthrough blueprint, as I mentioned, so I'm not frequently checking through those workshops anyway. But to have it at 6 o'clock, I'll get a digest of any of the emails that Lillian or Diane have deemed that are outliers and require me to see them, And so that'll be a really great experiment for me to do that. And then I also found through that another way that I can make the process of my podcasts even easier, because I mentioned to you, I just dial in and we do the podcast. And then for my More Cheese, Less Whiskers podcast and my Listing Agent Lifestyle podcast, I record an intro and an outro after I'm done with the podcast on my iPhone through my audio, my voice memo thing. So I've set it up now so that whenever I record a voice memo, as soon as I'm done with the memo, it automatically emails it to my team for the audio processing. So I've taken out the step of having to manually type in the email addresses. So I literally can do it with my cow hooves, which allows me to stay in that
as you're talking, Dean, because I think since birth, I guess, I've seen things visually, like thoughts visually. And I don't know if you have a pen or a pen there. I don't know. And do you have that? Oh, you got Remarkable.
I have Remarkable. And Dan,
can you put out another pitch for this?
Have you got one yet?
No, I haven't, because I freed myself up mostly from doing this. And the reason I did is that I've stopped doing all diagramming work by myself, and I do it with an artist.
Okay.
Either one of my program artists or, the people who actually does all the artwork for the materials in the program, or my cartoonist for the books. And first of all, I lose, I'm trying to push myself more and more to the point that I'm just talking,
Yes, me too.
But if I'm with an artist, I will just quickly, with a pen and paper, talk it through. Yeah. But if you just draw sort of an X, it's two lines that make an X, but it's wider than it is higher. Okay. So if if I can just retrace your conversation so far on the emails, that you answering emails is written in the left-hand side of the X. In other words, the one that goes down to nothing.
Yep.
And then on the other side, there's a freedom that you get out of that. So you're freeing yourself up from, and then you get to the intersection point. And on the other side, you're freed up to the point that this exactly is what you're doing, is you're taking activities that annoy you, that are how activities, and you're freeing yourself up for who activities on the other side.
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a very simple diagram that shows what the game plan here is, and it could be about anything. It just happens, we're just focusing on the particular thing about. So what's happening is that the how part of the email is declining down to nothing, as close to nothing as you can get. But on the other side, or you're actually reducing the how down to automation, actually.
Yeah.
And on the other side is an increasing number of who's who take care of everything on the other side.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That was the big thing, is that the realizing that one of the things that Ari talks about a lot, of course, is his process: optimize, automate, outsource. And I'm good at outsourcing, but I haven't really gone into the automation portions of stuff. And my eyes were opened really in Miami to see all the different ways that you can actually automate something, especially when I include human automation, but to have that is really a cool distinction. So that was a nice
I had never, can I stop there? I had never heard that term used before, those two words, human automation. That's a neat idea. That's been my. Well, I know it has, but you've never said the words before. And,
okay.
I mean, we call it delegation, but it's actually more than that. It is a set of rules. It's a set of rules that you put in place.
The way I describe it. Yeah, the way I describe it is that once I expanded my definition of automation to include things done by other people, humans, that changes everything. As long as my definition of automation is I'm not doing it. It's happening. Right? That's the
you're not doing the how. You're not doing the how, but you're identifying the skill and setting up the rules.
Yeah. I'm identifying the what. I'm driving the what. Yeah.
You're a whatter.
I am a whatter. That's right.
You're also a wire. You're also a wire.
Yeah.
I mean, because in order to communicate a what properly, you also have to communicate the why so that people get the full context.
I agree.
Yeah.
So that I use that in a lot of the times when we're talking about the email campaigns that I run that are so responsive, is because they're actually manned by humans. There's something, humans are still, we're still the as far as we know, the most intelligent things in the universe, right? So we won as far as we know.
And, I mean, we have, what is it? I was just reading Tim Larkin's wonderful book, which is called When Violence is the Answer. And the more I read it, I think it's one of the greatest philosophical books I've ever read. And I saw Tim 3 weeks ago now at Genius Network. And I bought 600 of his books and gave them out to everybody. And we're going to actually have Tim in for a 2-day workshop with our entire team next year.
Wow,
and,
very nice.
And everything. But and if anybody listening to you that hasn't gotten this book, download this book and read this book. And I have a feeling I'm going to read it about every 6 months because it's such a great book. And Tim's got 2 rules. Do everything you possibly can do to avoid any violent situation throughout your entire life. But if you cannot avoid it, then disable or kill the person who's doing violence. Those are his 2 rules.
That's right. That was pretty impactful. His thing, I think, is saying is that violence is never the answer until it's the only answer. But when it is, it's the only answer. Yes, exactly.
But anyway, going back to this, he just has a quote from somebody, that the human brain has, we have 100 billion, it's 100 million or 100 billion, but it's a big number, 100 million synapses, and they're all each of them is connected to 10,000 other synapses. And it's the most dense and extraordinarily well-developed mechanism in the entire universe, as far as we know. And so I think what the technological innovation is doing for us, it's allowing us to actually appreciate the possibilities for human automation.
Yes. And so I'm a big embracer of that. And I've found I've been using another service called Get Magic as well. And that's been I just like that as a little extension of my, it's right there on my cell phone. And it's just a little extension where at any time there's anything like, if I'm not buying something from Amazon, for instance, my Remarkable tablet, I saw the video, and within 30 seconds of watching the video, I decided I had to have it. And so I immediately took a screen capture, texted it to Get Magic, and said, "Can you order me one of these?" And they have my credit card on file, and they've got all this stuff. So I've saved the hassle of going there and filling in the form and doing all the stuff. It's just such a speed way, and so anytime there's anything like that, once I know what I want, that's my first thought is, can Get Magic do this for me? and it will happen. That could be from getting movie tickets or getting, anything, getting a reservation, setting up a massage, doing anything like that. Just being able to describe in a text what it is that I want it just takes a little bit of like practice and thinking. If I'm consciously thinking about, who can do this?
Yeah. Dean, you're getting pretty close to levitation here.
Well, fingers crossed. I mean, that's the goal,
I would just try, just to get started, I just try to do it for a 10-minute period.
Right.
See if I can levitate for the next 10 minutes.
See if I can levitate for 10 minutes. I mean, really.
Yeah.
That's
well, think about it. I mean, what's the number one problem that people, when they feel overwhelmed, what's the issue there when they're feeling overwhelmed?
I'm under time pressure.
I just don't have time, and I don't know how.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think we hit on this very early on in our conversations that, the brain, that's why brainstorming is such a great thing. That 10 minutes, I mean, it's the instant 10-minute procrastination buster. I mean, that's really what one 10-minute brainstorm session can instantly break you from a pattern of avoiding something. Because out of that brainstorm is certainly going to come the clarity of at least chunking down some the next steps, or who can do something. You get more clear on what's actually involved in the macro what of what it is that you're avoiding. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about Aries Workshop? Did you contribute? Did you make contributions that really drew people being interested in how you're thinking about this? Because I got to believe that for area, it was a real plus to have you in that workshop.
Yeah, well, that was what I was down there to speak at the event. So I just decided I would go and actually attend the event too. So I was there to talk about automating. We talked about a lot of different things because that certainly I've been an advocate for doing less before Ari. Before I knew Ari, that was why it was such a since third grade, really.
No, you were on this career path early.
Yeah.
And you were getting very, very specific written market feedback from your teachers early. They were identifying your unique ability. You had the benefit of having your teachers, identify your unique ability early.
That's right. That's right. So I spoke about that sort of thing, about the how and the who, and we spoke about a lot of email marketing things because that was something that everyone was very interested as well. But so I got to contribute over the 2.5 days, so it was a lot of fun. But people, they're very, it's almost like it's a really interesting thing for people to think about human automation.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to, really running high volume email campaigns. It's I've coined a phrase called email baristas, and that's the human that is handling the human element of the replies to these emails that we send that are, eliciting a response from people. And the reason I call them email baristas is because the person with the skill level to run the espresso machine at Starbucks and remember how to make all those complicated drinks on demand is that person has the skill to handle managing incoming email replies, at a high volume. And because often people say, well, when you do like adding that human element to it, they're saying, well, that's not scalable. Well, I say, you know what? If you look at it, if you describe Starbucks on the surface, it's completely unscalable. You're selling custom, ready to made, on-site, ready-made beverages, customized with millions of variables, on demand, in person for $3 to $5. That doesn't seem scalable. Yet it's one of the most wonderful scaling stories in American business,
Yeah. Well, here's the one that sort of relates to it, because I will tell you, in addition to Starbucks, which is sort of a standard feature of my life, I go to Starbucks and I'll look for a Starbucks because it's sort of like an 80% solution for me. I'm going to get a pretty good coffee, thing. But I have to tell you, if you have a favorite independent coffee maker where there is actually a great barista, and and they remember you, that's a dimension above Starbucks. And my feeling is that Starbucks actually created all of their competition because they trained hundreds, thousands of people who probably, if you look at all their great baristas from 20 years ago, I think the automation of Starbucks happened about maybe 15 years ago, 15 years ago, where the machines, they build in enough knowledge that the machines can do a good job. Then they just exploded. But I can remember some baristas. I still remember them. There was a guy in Vancouver who we were there only once every quarter, and Babs and I would walk in the front door, and he would see us, and he says, I got him. And he remembered how we want our coffee from 3 months ago. That's the type of skill you're talking about here.
Yeah, it really is. That's amazing. There's a place like that in Yorkville that I go when I'm there, Cafe Zaza. And Rafi, the guy who's the owner, it's on Bel Air. It's on Bel Air, right next to Cafe Nervosa.
Oh yeah,
and,
down.
Okay.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, right. I know.
So he used to have where there's a gelato shop there now, but it used to be that upper area that was just a little walk in the thing. But he was the most personable guy.
Yeah.
I always talk about him as like, if there's ever such a thing as return on enthusiasm, this guy has it. You could see, I'd sit there, he's Italian, and I would sit there, and the whole front of this building, it's not much more than like a, 10 by 20 or 10 by 15 little area, right? But the whole front of it has like a garage door that kind of opens up.
Yep.
So the whole thing opens up. And, he's Italian, and he would sit there, and I would sit out just in the transition from the outside to the inside, and I would see these ladies walking from towards Harry Rosen, walking to up to Yorkville Avenue, and you could see the look on their face. They would start to kind of like smile and get ready for it, because as soon as they would cross into the visual area, it was always "Ciao, Bella!" He would yell out to all the ladies, and you could see them looking forward to that moment in the day. They know what's coming, and kind of you could see them kind of preparing for it, and it was just kind of funny. But you walk in, and he knows, I'm up every quarter, and he knows exactly what I like, and it's fun.
Well, you're unforgettable, Dean. You have one great personal quality. You're unforgettable.
Oh, well, that's I can't. He's
in the best
unforgettable kind of guy.
In the best possible way.
Well,
some people are unforgettable for other.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah. But this is a fascinating discussion because I've got one of my books I sort of line them up in my mind. I don't write them down because I don't want to make a commitment, but I have one. It's third or fourth in line right now. It's called Making People Irreplaceable. And it's my creative response to all this talk about machines eliminating human beings. And because and it was triggered a long time ago where I went as just an invited guest into one of the strategic coach workshops with one of the other coaches at what we call the signature level of the program. And so, and I usually walk in and rather than me having a presentation, I just say, has anybody got any thoughts or ideas about coach that if you ever saw me, you would like to ask me? And that's how we get started. And one guy got upset, are you replaceable? And I said, absolutely not. And you should have the same goal, that you're not replaceable. And they said, well, what if you get taken out of the picture? Like you have an airplane crash or something, you get taken out of the picture. Well, I said, if that happens, Babs is gone too, because we fly together everywhere. And I said, and so he said, what will happen to coach? And I said, well, insofar as we're able to anticipate that, we've already thought it through. We've thought it through from a legal standpoint. We've thought it through from a financial standpoint. So all the game plan is there. Every one of our team leaders has a written plan of what they would do during the next first 100 days if anything happened to Babs and me. But I want to say they wouldn't replace me and they wouldn't replace Bab. They'd have to come up with another game plan. They would have to come up with another solution. They'd have to reorganize. They'd have to restructure. And they said, well, how do you feel about that? And I said, well, I feel great about it. No, but that they would have to come up with another game plan. And I said, well, what do I care? I'm gone.
Right. Exactly.
I'm on to the next whatever it is, And I said, not only that, I will tell you right now, I can identify very quickly a dozen to 15 of our team members and coach. They're not replaceable either. We'd have to come up with another strategy.
A new game plan. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and they said, well, isn't that a dangerous way to build a company? And I says, okay. I says, well, let's put that over there as one way to develop your company. What's the alternative?
What is the alternative? Yeah.
In other words, that they're interchanging parts. I said, you get greatness out of interchanging parts. You have to be kind of satisfied with average and mediocre to be able to do that. So on this chance, you've got irreplaceable and greatness, and over here you've got replaceable and mediocre. So is that your choice of how you'd like to proceed?
Right. Yeah.
And I said, here's the thing. But he said, well, they have, if you think they're irreplaceable, they have power over you. And I says, well, I said, where else are they going to go and be irreplaceable?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I said, if they're irreplaceable to me, guess what? I'm irreplaceable to them. So we've got a double compact here. And you could just see a buzz going through the room. I said, don't have mediocrity as your future ideal.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Just go with it. That's great. I like that. Milk it while you can, right? That's the thing, is be remarkable. And aim to be irreplaceable. That's great.
Yeah, think of any great entertainer or great athlete. Are they replaceable? Absolutely not. That's why that's why they're great, is because they're irreplaceable.
Yes. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, there was an article in trying to think. It was in one of I have a quarterly discussion book. So it was an article. We take articles and make them into a book. So it's tomorrow night here. But there was an article about how when you have a great entrepreneur like Steve Jobs, the person who takes over is usually not an idea person. They're an execution guy.
That's true. Yes.
So a huge who knows the why and the what is replaced by a person who knows the how. But what drops off, there isn't any more new why and how. Because remember Steve Jobs, when Steve Jobs would introduce a new Apple, a new Apple thing, the whole world would stop. The stock market would stop. The technological world would stop.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs. And
to watch their keynote. Exactly.
And the reason is because he was going to explain a new what and why in the world. Yes. And that's what drove all the other innovation in the world. Is this one innovator would come out with a new what. And the only difference between Steve Jobs and Elon Musk is that with Steve Jobs, it was available tomorrow. And with Elon Musk, it's available when we get to Mars. Yes,
right.
So he's not selling the future. He's selling, if you buy this tomorrow, this is going to be your future.
Yeah, we're shipping today. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're shipping today. So the whole thing of getting preoccupied with automating how as the ideal for your future, you should be freeing yourself up for a more what and why as your ideal future.
Yes, I love it. And setting it up so that it recurs. I mean, that's really the best part, is to see your things, moving along. In a way, that is almost a way of, you're never going to make yourself replaceable in the what and the why area, but it's almost imperative that you make yourself replaceable in the how and the execution of it.
Oh yeah,
that's really that's a cool thing. So you're setting up.
That's a great distinction. What you just said there. That's a really great distinction, because because so many people, and I came up with a definition of retirement that really has a lot of bite to it this week, and I just on the spur of the moment, because somebody, I will, just catch people if they use the retirement word in Strategic Coach, and I said, here's my definition of retirement for entrepreneurs: a sudden and permanent loss of personal and organizational capability.
A sudden and
permanent. A sudden and permanent loss of personal and organizational capability.
That is wonderful. Personal and organizational capability.
Think what happens when an entrepreneur retires.
Yeah, the big party and the watch.
Yeah, the big party's over.
Can you imagine? Most people, they would have a. If you announced your retirement, Dan, at which, in most companies of your size and your length of being a business, a party like your 70th birthday party could very well have been a farewell to Dan retirement party. At 70, that's what that might have looked like, to celebrate a lifetime of work to build Strategic Coach and send you and Bab off into the sunset for endless cruises, and that would have been an appropriate celebration of an accomplished life. And here it is that was the kickoff of your 25-year plan.
Yeah. But think about it. Let's just re-step that, Dean. You got us from the lobby area of the Four Seasons Hotel up to the party room under false pretenses.
I really did, yeah.
And I could have had a heart attack when the door opened, and so it could have.
Oh, man, that's so funny.
but it didn't. So it went one way or the other. Okay. Yeah. So what have we talked about so far? This has been fascinating.
It really has.
Yeah, but I love this concept of human automation because it really changes the whole conversation, because it's always been humans or automation.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it's human automation.
But that's the best. I think that's the most effective thing right now. You look at it, I'm seeing that most people are looking at them either or, right? They're looking at automation, or they're looking at humans.
All the stuff, and all the stuff we're talking about. The big part of what's being presented at Abundance 360 and and everything like that. And it seems to me it's like I can't quite talk about it, but it's like they're talking about chickenless eggs or something,
Right. It's so funny. Did I miss an X Prize announcement for some avatar robot, or somebody mentioned that it was just announced? An X Prize contest for a physical robot avatar that you could transport into and control everything about it. Now that there's an example of looking at that is going to be a long way away. I mean, that's not going to happen immediately. It's going to be very expensive. But then I read in Japan, and there are people who are renting themselves out as like Ubers with a iPad, attached to them for people to attend conferences or meetings or whatever, almost in person. It's almost like a human. What's the robot that you have? The
Beam.
The Beam. It's almost like a human beam, where somebody is like, they've got the iPad Pro on FaceTime with so you're seeing everything, and you could just instruct them to, okay, let's go over here. And somebody, they've got like a helmet type of thing with the thing attached to their, in front of them, almost like you're looking at them attached to this human body, so you could stand at eye level and have a conversation with somebody, or tell them, oh, let's go look over here.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty fascinating to see what's happening.
To make it really work, if they had the helmet like some of the motorcycle helmets, where there are actually mirrors on the front.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. Yeah.
So the helmet has your face.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, here's an interesting thing about the Japanese, and this has been in place for about 30 years. I read about it 30 years ago, that you can rent, let's say you're a child of parents and you don't like visiting with your parents. I mean, you just you find it a drag to visit with your parents. You can actually hire someone to go and be you with your parents. Okay, and it works out really well, because the person you meet is very sociable. They've got charm, they've got and they've got no emotional record with your parents, because these are just they're on their best behavior. They show up.
Right.
They show up, and they find over time the parents actually prefer the surrogate to their actual child.
Right.
And they've had some problems with who the will gets left to.
Oh my goodness!
Over the years, that the one who comes, and they arrive on time, they bring presents, they remember things, and everything like this. Whereas, their own son was a bit of a slug and a stick, so,
oh my goodness.
And it's all boredom and, it's, hours of stillness where nobody talks and everything like that, where the surrogate son shows up with lots of news, is very interesting. Plus, the surrogate son is an expert on visiting with parents. So this this is a barista of a very high level. This is a
that is human automation. Yes, exactly.
There is human automation for you.
Dan, did you? I think that I emailed you an article about something we talked about last time about this migration to Cloudlandia. Did you get that, or did I?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think I did. And I've got a file for you, and I just popped it in the file because it's been 2 workshop weeks in a row. So
there you go. Let me share with you what I found in that, because I wanted to talk about it a little bit. Remember, we mentioned that I really feel like everybody's migrating to Cloudlandia as if it's a real place. And now there's some real data on this that 26% of Americans right now are self-reportedly almost constantly online, meaning that they're living their life online. They're in Cloudlandia. 43% are on several times a day. So 77% of Americans right now go online at least daily. If you include the 8% that are on once a day. But among millennials, 4 out of 10 are almost constantly online. And there are only 5%, less than 5% go on less than several times a week. 11% less than daily, which is really
this is just online period for any purpose, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Well, I put in 2 hours a day.
Sure.
But mine are mostly looking for things I didn't know I was looking for.
That's exactly right. But you find it, but you're in and out in that 2 hours, and then, like you said, your phone bill has one recurring number that comes on your smartphone is the Dean phone, and that's it.
I don't even know if they billed me for you, Dean.
Right, probably not. It's all included in your plan now. The way you go, exactly.
Yeah, but my it's sometimes my phone isn't charged up, but always on Sunday morning it gets charged up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing I get up on Sunday morning. I said, let's make sure the phone is charged up completely, because we do not want to lose power in the middle of one of these discussions.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly looking for evidence of that migration, and I think it's a huge thing. And there was a very famous book that was written in the 1960s by David Reisman, and it's called The Lonely Crowd. And he was just observing the impact of television on the population. So it was the mid-60s. And what he was noticing was 3 different kinds of, and it was about America, so it was 3 different kinds of Americans. And he identified them as traditional-centered, inner-centered, and outer-centered. And what he was showing was that there was still a considerable portion of Americans who took their values and what they were thinking about every day and what they were involved every day were the traditions they came up in. It could be small town tradition, could be family tradition, could be ethnic tradition, religious tradition, or anything like that. But these were traditions that they
were basically things that were diminishing in society, but they were still fully a part of. Amish would be a really good example of all of them. Like if you're an Amish, you belong to an Amish community or a Mennonite community, they're all there. Then there were the inner-centered people, and they've moved away from the physical circumstances of their tradition, but they still have the principles inside them. And I would count myself as that individual. I'm an inner-centered person. I'm not a tradition-centered. And the outer-centered people who their judgments about themselves and who they thought they were was all coming from what other people thought about them and their interactions with other people. So they had no inner or traditional base to themselves. It was all what they were how they were making sense of their interactions with the world. And that was only involved in television. But in the area of Cloudlandia and the social media aspect of Cloudlandia, that would be 100% for a lot of people.
Yeah, I bet you're right. This is really, I just think this, it's going to be a very interesting thing. I was sharing how, we look at this graphic 20 years from now, if we're saying that it's taken 20 years to get from zero to that in terms of the life of the internet, the functional internet, really. I still remember, 20 years ago, national magazines and television shows that it was daring journalism to write an article about I locked myself in my New York City apartment with my only means of communication as the internet, and to see if I could survive a week with my only contact with the outside world. And now it's almost 20 years later, the daring argument would be I locked myself in my New York City apartment without access to the internet to see if I could survive.
Well, I just read an article about someone who was so outraged by the results of the presidential election that he has not connected with the internet at all since then. Okay. But but what's funny about it, the interview with him is all over the internet.
Oh boy, that's so funny, isn't it?
Yeah. And but he cannot. I mean, if he's true to his goal, he will not have read his own interview on the internet.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, it's fascinating what we're doing here, but there's some key takeaways for me, and that is the human automation is by far the big new thought. The big new thought for me right here. I think this is a tremendous thought, and
that's great.
And we've taken. I mean, just like we took procrastination and made it a joyful activity. You've taken the polarity out of human and automation. You've turned it into a single concept, and I think it's a wonderful concept.
And that really fits with. I think if I can tie it into your thing of being aiming to be irreplaceable, is that rather than thinking about making yourself replaceable, is thinking about making yourself multipliable. That really becomes the thing. That's your real goal. Is that if you're what Wyatt Woodsmall would call an adaptive problem solver, somebody who's figuring out things that don't exist and figuring out what to do, and packaging it in a way that it becomes a technical challenge, which means that the answer is known and somebody just needs to know how to do it, that allows you to be multiplied.
Yeah.
So you're replacing yourself from the actual doing of anything, but at the same time, multiplying the impact of what it is that you've figured out to do.
Yeah, multiplying without doing.
That's exactly right. Let's pick up there next time.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're on for the next 2 Sundays. I looked
like
at the
that.
schedule ahead, and actually it was a real joy.
Me too. Okay, Dan.
Procrastinate away.
That's right. Okay, I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Okay, bye.